Ugh. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Alright, so today we're going to continue working on our Jet 200 Performer. As you can see, I've got it all torn down, well, mostly torn down in the previous video. So today I'm going to spray it with some degreaser and actually scrub it a little bit. Just get rid of all the nasty caked on grease and grime. I worked on it a very good 3-4 hours yesterday, and my hands were completely black when I was done. So I really don't like that feeling. So yeah, let's start by getting this thing washed. Alright, got most of the grease and grime off of it, so yeah, let's let her dry off a little bit and then we'll start really taking it apart. Alright, so as you can see, it's pretty clean. There's some spots I couldn't reach, like down there, but I know I said I was going to remove the cables, but I left them in because I'd rather just change them out when I have everything to do so. I have the cables, I don't have these, like this rubber sleeve and these little rubber sleeves, so I'd rather just have everything here so I can put it back exactly the way it came off. But yeah, let's start with removing the exhaust so I can actually finish cleaning down there. Okay, that was a little bit of a pain because it's been on here for so long. But if you never removed an exhaust from a Lambretta before, it's just this nut here, this nut here, clamp up front. There's a bolt that goes here into the case right here, and then back here is a nut. So once you get all that stuff off, just keep working it until it comes off. The header I'm gonna leave on because you have to remove the engine shrouds to get that off. So yeah, next up, let's start taking the motor apart, I guess. Alright, before I take the motor apart, I'm going to drain the crankcase oil, or the transmission oil actually. So it's this bolt here, it's a 10mm Allen. So this is the drain, and this one up here is the fill. And of course there's a vent up here. So I'm just going to crack the fill in case the vent is clogged up. Okay, now do the drain. Alright, nice and nasty. Alright, there you have it. So you drain the oil from a Lambretta. Alright, while this oil is draining, I'm going to start taking off the kickstart cover nuts. I'm going to actually pull this off to drain the rest of the oil. So I believe it's just 10mm nuts all the way around. All right, so I had to take off all the nuts and the wave washers and then just crack this thing open. Those things drain a little bit and we'll come back to it. All right, so doesn't look too bad, just dirty. Let's get this gasket off of here. All right, now that the gasket is off of it, and actually drained a little more oil out of it. But looking at this thing, I think the chain is either worn out or loose or whatever. I don't think it's supposed to have that much play. But that's okay. We have a brand new chain going in this thing. Also new tensioners. As I mentioned in the previous video, I've got new bearings, new seals, new gaskets. That way you Lambretta guys can stop giving me crap about reusing bearings and things like that. So yeah, we're going to change everything in this one. All right, let's, I guess, compress this clutch and start getting this stuff apart. So, when you go to remove a Lambretta clutch, you have to compress it and then remove this circlip in there. So, to do that, you need a Lambretta clutch compressor tool. I think I got this thing from Casa Lambretta. So, it only goes on one way, only goes on this way, it won't go on this way. And then you use the M6 nuts that you removed from the kickstart cover to hold it in place. So when you actually go to put it in back together, you'll see how I have to do it. You're gonna have to put all the plates into this thing first and then tighten all back up and then position the plates back in. Of course, it's a Lambretta, it's gotta be difficult. So remove the circlip here. After that, you can take the tension off, and then it'll just come apart. Get this thing out of the way. Okay, as you all remove them and keep them in the exact same order. But usually if a bike that you purchased has been sitting for a very long time, these plates are stuck together. Doesn't mean they're bad, you just have to pull them apart and then re-lubricate them or whatever. And then do that, and then you have reassemble. You should be able to reuse the clutch. Got the clutch out of it. You want to bend this little locking tab on this locking washer thing so you can clear the nut to remove that nut. So we'll just tap that thing open again. Okay, I believe it's 22 millimeter. You know what, let me take the front sprocket off first. I believe since I'm using impact, I just loosen it. That's really all it is. Okay. Now we can remove the clutch basket. So both these parts and the chain will come off like this. Okay, leave it in a bucket and let it drain overnight. It'll wake up to a giant mess if you just leave it on your workbench. So I'm gonna leave it like that, exactly the way I removed it. And yeah, like I said, I'll let it drain. Meantime, I'll clean the case up a little bit. All right, before we actually move on to removing the cylinder, this little thing here, I don't know what it's called, but out of the two I've worked on, this slid right off. But there's a special tool to remove this if it's stuck on there. I actually have that tool. I've never had to use it though. But this came right off, so I'm gonna leave it there. Don't lose it. So that exposes the bearing that's behind here. This would be the clutch side bearing and crank. Okay, now we go on the other side and start taking the engine covers off. All right, now onto the other side. I'm gonna start by removing this carb intake bellow and then the carb itself, and then we can actually get the shrouds off of the engine. So ugh. Okay, that's not good. Carb's full of water, but it's okay. We're gonna change it anyway. Loosen the clamp back here, 8mm nut. Take the throttle cable off. Just moving this little arm up. That's off. Pull that out. Choke cable, you're gonna have to unscrew this. Ugh, yeah, this thing's full of water. Oh well, no worries. We're gonna, like I said, go over everything anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Alright, let's take this back fan shroud off first. Alright, rear fan shroud's out. I'll throw this in my parts washer and clean all that up. Back on the other side of the motor, I'm going to take this 24mm nut off, and I'm going to start tapping on this engine bolt. Hopefully it goes through that way. I will be replacing these engine mounts with the silent blocks, so those should be here tomorrow actually. 24mm nut, if you're curious what size that was. Interesting. Looks like there's two lock washers here, but it's one that's split. Okay. Hopefully it's not seized in there. Nope. Good. All right. Okay, let me get a punch or something so I can drive that engine bolt out. Got me a nice punch. Try this. Drive this bolt out. Yeah. Pretty easy. See, I got my mid jack here because we're gonna lower the motor away from the frame. That way I can actually get this shroud off. And I may need to pull this. We'll see how it goes. I may need to pull the header off before that happens, but we'll figure it out when we get there. On the other side now. Pull this bolt out. See, I've got the mid jack supporting the engine up. I'll just lower it down. Now the rear shock is still connected to the motor, so be careful with that. So let me try to get this front shroud off, and then we'll try to work on the header. All right, nut on the front here. Undo this guy, and hopefully this will come off. If not, we'll have to get that header off. Get the spark plug off too. Okay. No, I was wrong. You have to pull the header off before you can get the front shroud off. Alright, so the reason I was saying you need to get the shroud off to get the header off It's because the shroud covers up this nut. Well, not completely, but it's really hard to see it. So now that I've got the shroud loose, I can actually access this nut, so I make it a little easier. 11mm for this nut on the header. You have to work this thing off one turn at a time. One more 11mm nut. These are actually special nuts. I think they're copper or brass nuts for the header. So make sure when you go to replace it, you use the same thing, because these don't react to the heat expanding and contracting. So your header stays tight onto the cylinder head. All right, that's off. Covers off. Okay, here you go. Let's take these 4 nuts off the top here, and then we'll take the cylinder head off, and then we'll hopefully slide the cylinder off of it. All right, 14mm nuts holding the cylinder head on. Take these off a little at a time so you don't warp the head. Okay, got the head off of it. Now we can slide the cylinder off. Remove this thick cylinder head gasket off first. Wow, looks deformed, but should be okay. All right. Of course, it's a little stuck. There you go. The heck? Weird. I don't know what's catching it. There we go. All right, cylinder's off. Let's see here. This one looks in good shape. All right, just needs some cleaning. Okay, let's get the piston off next. Okay, so to remove the piston, you need to remove both circlips, one on the other side and the one on this side. Circlip. Okay, so after you got the circlip off, you use I used a little hammer and a socket about the same size as a wrist pin and kind of just tapped it out, but that's not the correct way to do it. This is with the tool. This is a wrist pin removal tool made by Motion Pro. So you're gonna put it in like this. Put the nut on the other side. Okay, there's 2 thrust washers inside the piston. Make sure you don't lose these because they have to go back in to take up the play when you reinstall it back onto the new crank. All right, that and the wrist pin bearing. Make sure you don't lose that either. And again, I think the new crank actually comes with a new one, but you may be okay without that. Alright, so I got the piston off. Now let's work on the flywheel. Okay, now I've got the cylinder and piston off. There's no reason for the motor to hang down like this, so let's try to bolt it back into the frame so it's steady while I'm working on it. Got my bolt, put that back through it. A little loose for now. Okay, so I got the engine back into the frame. Now let's focus on removing the flywheel. So the first thing we need to do is remove this little metal clip that's holding the flywheel cover on. Like that. With that, turn this little cover so the keys line up either way. Yep. Okay, once the cover's off, take out the 17mm nut. I believe this is a reverse thread. Yes. So clockwise to remove it. Okay. Once that's out, there should be like a wave washer in here. Yep. Like that. Get that out. Then you have to get your Lambretta flywheel removal tool. Throw that baby in there. All the way. Okay. That. Tighten the center bolt. Should pop the flywheel right off of it. Flywheel's off. We're not going to use that, and we're not going to use this 6-volt stator either. So first thing you do is remove this little wire cover up here. It's a pain because you can't really fit a socket over. You're going to do this manually. So there's two 7mm bolts on the top here. Once you get that off, it's 3 pieces they use as a wire grommet. Okay, we got the 2 screws out of it, little 7mm. Now it's the top cover, a little rubber grommet in the middle, and the bottom cover. So you get all that stuff off before you can actually pull the wire through. Mag housing for the stator. Okay, we just spent a good 5 minutes removing these little parts here that act as a grommet on the top of the mag housing. So let's get the stator off. It's just 3 10mm bolts. So this clip is actually very important, okay? So when you remove this, make sure you save the clip. It's not, we'll just throw it away. That actually keeps the wire away from the flywheel when it's spinning at high speed. Okay, I've seen people leave that out and flywheel cut right into the wiring. Next thing you know, no spark. So yeah, make sure you save that. It has to go back in. All right. Ooh, I don't know if it's leaking stuff from this seal or what, but that's interesting. Oh, I think that's just grease, extra grease. Okay, so there's several ways of removing the mag housing. First thing you need to do is remove the 3 nuts holding it on. After that, you can either grab it and try to pull it off. If you're lucky, it'll come off. But if not, you can use 2 M6x10 bolts. Simply thread those in these threaded holes here on either side. Tighten them in, and again, if you're lucky, it'll pop the mag housing off. You can either use those, or you can use these T-bars that are specially made for that. These just do the same thing, thread in, you can actually pull at the same time to get the mag housing off. Or, if you can find one of these tools, I think I got this from Casa Lambretta a few years ago. Like I said in a previous video, I've been collecting Lambretta tools for a long time, and luckily I grabbed this one because they no longer have it. So yeah, this is specifically made just to remove the mag housing. You simply bolt this guy onto the mag housing like this with your 2 M6x10 bolts. One there, one on the bottom. These bolts might be a little too long, but that's okay. After that, you can use either this handle to turn this bolt in. It'll push against the crank, and then therefore pull the mag housing out. So you can either use this handle or I think 22mm socket. So keep turning this guy, the mag housing will come off. And yeah, this one seems to not be stuck. So I've been lucky so far with my 2 Lambretta builds that I've done. So yeah, like I said, just turn this bolt in, and then you should break the mag housing free. You can pull it off. So yeah, there you go. Next up, we'll get the crank removed. Okay, so to remove the crank, you need this crank removal tool. Bolts onto the side of the case, 2 M8 nuts and 2 M6 nuts. Then just tighten the center bolt. I'll slowly push the crank out. Okay. Go to the other side and get that thing out real quick. All right, now the crank is out. Kind of turn it so the rod is all the way into the crank, and you kind of pivot it out of the case like this. So it's pretty cool. This is your normal Ally taper crank, but we're going with the GB crank on this build, so we won't be reusing this guy. All right, now that I've got the crank out of it, I'm gonna be removing the seal plate right here. Get yourself an impact driver like this, or the one you hit with a hammer. Put your number 3 Phillips head screw in here, not a number 2, because you put a number 2 in there and you try to do this, it might strip the screws out. So push this guy up against these screws and tap the trigger. Nice and easy. You use the right tools, you won't run into any problems. Okay, seal plate out. That's the drive side bearing. Hey look, it says USSR right there. It's an inside joke for the guy has been giving me crap about reusing bearings. So we're gonna remove that now. I have not done that yet, so we'll figure it out together. Okay, before I actually try to press this bearing out, we're gonna remove the chain guide and the chain tensioner. So you're gonna have to knock these little locking tabs off of the bolt holding it in place. There's 1, there's 2. We do have a new chain guide and chain tensioner. I'll be putting them back on there, so we won't be reusing these guys. The 2 10mm bolts, and this guy will come right off. All right, now I got a clear view of the bearing. Okay, so to remove this drive side bearing on the case, there's a special tool you can use. This thing is made by BGM, and of course it didn't come with any instructions, so I guess we'll just have to figure it out. So by looking at this, I'm assuming this collar will go into the bearing like that. This bolt go through the middle, and it didn't come with an Allen that big, so thankfully I have the kit, and it's the 14mm. So I'm guessing we have to hold this side for now. Let's go on the other side and we'll figure out how this other stuff works. Alrighty, so now we're on the other side. I'm guessing this big plate will kind of sit right here on this end, and this big nut will go here. And I guess we can hold the other side and tighten this nut, and it'll slowly pull the bearing out, or hold this side and tighten the other, tighten the other side, and it'll do the same thing. So before I do that, I'm going to heat the case up a little bit. I'm trying to expand it a little bit, make it easier.
A few moments later.
Okay, let's see if I can do this quickly. Okay. Alrighty. I don't know if that's the correct way to use it, but it worked for me. Okay, so before we move forward, a couple guys giving me crap about reusing the USSR bearings. USSR meaning from Russia. In the raffle bike I just did, that only had 14 miles on it. Reason I reused it because really there's nothing wrong with these bearings. This bike has 3,000 miles on it, and this bearing is completely solid. There's literally no play in it, but it rolls extremely smooth. I mean, what are you guys talking about? I don't understand. Yeah, this is a budget build. I would reuse this bearing. I'd just leave it alone, just replace the seals and whatnot. So yeah, guys, unless you can show me a blown up bearing, probably from lack of lubrication or whatever, really there's nothing wrong with this bearing. I don't know what you guys are talking about. All right, anyways, let's just move forward. Okay, so onto the back of the engine. I've already removed the wheel. It's just 4 13mm nuts. So to remove the rear hub, you gotta remove this locking socket cap screw on the back first. Okay, get that off. You move the locking collar, and then remove this rear hub nut. The hub nut is a 27mm socket. Okay. A wave washer behind that. So there's a bevel on that lay shaft, and this hub presses up against it. So you need something to pop this off, like this puller that I have here. This guy is from, I think it's from K2 Classics out in the UK. This is the cheaper one. There's a different one that actually clamps onto the outside of the hub. But this one works just fine, so I'm going to reuse this one, or I'm going to use this one. Alright, now I've got the tool bolted onto the hub. I'm going to tighten the center bolt. I should pop the hub off the output shaft. I probably like this tool better than the one that grabs from the outside, because I've seen those kind of grabbers kind of bend things. You probably won't bend this, but you might crack it, but yeah. Get this off. Yep, popped off pretty easy. Okay. Ooh, some nice crispy pad. The pads look okay. Alrighty, I'm gonna remove this stuff here, and that way we can get the lay shaft out. Alright, since I'm gonna give this motor a nice scrub in my parts cleaner, I'm gonna go ahead and remove the brake pads. It's just these little snap rings that hold this little plate on, hold the pads on. So that's that. After that, you should be able to just slide these guys off. I need a screwdriver or something. That was easy. Take this plate off right here, and then get this collar off of the lay shaft. Hopefully I can. I'm not sure. Is there a tool that maybe just a flat blade screwdriver there will separate it? Yep. Okay. All right. Next up, we'll remove this rear plate here. This was a pain in the butt last time I did it, so hopefully this one's a little easier. Okay, I've got these little covers and plates removed. So now that exposes a seal right here. You can either replace the seal or the entire bearing if the bearing's bad. But up here, I disconnected the linkage from the shifter cable. And I'm going to remove this little arm here that's connected to the shaft that shifts the gears. So before I remove this, I'm going to mark 2 marks. Right there. Ooh. And one right there. And now, just so they're lined up, I have a little reference mark so I can put it back exactly the same way it was removed, because otherwise you'll have to kind of keep messing with it till it shifts right. I don't know that. I don't have time for that, so I'll just put a little basic mark there, and we'll put it back exactly the way I removed it. So I've got this 10mm loose, but maybe I have to remove it. Huh. Yeah, I probably have to remove it. Let me see if I can shift this thing. Yep, definitely had to remove it. Okay, like I said, I put a mark there, and there's also a mark on that shaft. So when I go to put it back on, I'll know exactly how to line it back up. Yep, so. All right, let's go to the other side and start removing the end plate. I have the end plate right there. We're gonna remove that to get the gears out. So these are 11mm nuts. Just take them off. Oh wow, that's actually really loose. You guys are really loose. Jeez. They used torque wrenches back in the day. All right, whatever. Be sure to fix that. Okay, once you get all the nuts off, bring it, bust out your T-bars, or you can again use M6x10 bolts. Kind of push or thread these guys into these 2 threaded holes, and make sure they bottom out against the case. This one's actually coming out really easily, but so don't keep tightening it. You need to bang on the shaft here to get it off the plate, okay? Because it's pulling the entire assembly out with it if you don't do that. So that's that. Nice and easy. Also got a new bearing for the end plate, which goes there. We'll replace that after this thing is all cleaned up. Shim goes there. Okay. Okay, once the end plate's removed, you can remove this little bearing here. End plate, the other end plate bearing, or the lay shaft bearing actually, or one of the lay shaft bearings, whatever. There's like 47 of these damn things everywhere. So you got that, and you got a shim that goes right here. I usually keep these Chinese takeout containers just for this, just so I can remove stuff and kind of leave them in there, and that way I know how it goes back together. So save your Chinese containers. It'll make your life a little easier. Okay, so that exposes the lay shaft, the shifter cross. The shifter cross looks okay. I'm not sure if it's like a Vespa where you go and replace that after every build, but I wanted to order one of these, but nobody has it in stock, so we're on a time crunch. I'm going to reuse it. And that didn't really have any problem shifting this thing when it was running, so that's a plus. See if we can remove the Christmas tree just by pulling on it. There's also, I believe, a shim right here, so make sure you don't lose that. And there's a bearing back here as well, and there's a race back there. I'm not sure how we're going to remove that. I think there's a certain way, but we'll figure it out. Okay, now the Christmas tree is removed. This bearing in here is removed. I believe you can just go on the other side and tap the output shaft out. Just on my last one, I kind of removed the shaft without actually removing the cross with it, and then shot the little ball and the spring inside here out into the case. Luckily, I didn't lose them, but you want to keep this thing intact while you remove it, okay? Because if you do lose those balls in the spring, you got to replace them. All right, so let me go to the other side and see if I can tap this thing out real quick. Okay, you notice I used a rubber hammer to tap on the end of this lay shaft or output shaft. So in here is a O-ring that you do need to replace. The bearing is here for the output shaft. That's the bearing you saw on the other side. That one's pretty solid too. But I have a new one. I'll replace it. This I'll leave alone. I'll probably replace the ball and the springs inside because I have that. And the O-ring, of course, and then we'll reinstall it. But this is good. It's out of it. Leave that alone right there and let the oil drain off. Okay, so now I'm going to remove the rest of the cables. The other shifter cable, clutch cable. I'll be replacing the cables anyway. So, yeah, I'll get that off the case. After that, really, I'm going to take the front bolt off, take the shock bolt off, and then the case will be free, and actually clean it up in my parts washer. All right, so as you can see, I got all the cables detached. We're going to go ahead and remove the rear shock. I believe there's a 24mm nut, top and the bottom, with some lock washers. So there's the rear shock. Actually, I have a new one going on, so we probably won't be reusing that one. Just put it down here. Front engine bolt, same way I removed it earlier. Just remove the nut, and I should be able to just push it through. All right, as you can see why I left it in the frame. It's kind of like a cheap engine stand. Okay, now I got the case out of the frame. I'll go ahead and remove this rear lay shaft bearing. I'm going to use my Vespa blind bearing puller, the one that's this size. But before I do that, I'm going to put the nuts back onto the studs here. because this thing is what's going to hold it while it pulls it. So I want to make sure this doesn't damage the threads. This is not the right way. It's not the tool to do it, but I'm pretty sure it'll work. So that's why I'm doing it this way. That, and you can also whack it out of there, but I try not to do that if I can help it. So that's there. All set up, got it wrapped around the bearing. So now we'll do the same thing we've done in other videos. You know what? Yeah, like that. And maybe I'll take this opportunity to actually build an engine stand for their Lambrettas. But this seems to be working flawlessly. I feel like removing the bearing just fine. Let me see. Oh, let's see what's wrong with it. So the 10mm nuts I put back on to give me a smooth surface is getting in the way. So I'm going to remove them, and then we can get this bearing out of there. There you go. All right, it's easy enough. This rear bearing is pretty solid too. Oh, this is a Japanese bearing. So, again, you could probably reuse this one just fine. All right, so I guess the only one is that people are telling me to replace are the crank bearings. Okay, well, I got a new one of those anyway. So, all right, that bearing's removed. We can remove all the other little miscellaneous things from the case, and then finally put in the parts washer. All right, guys, you can see my lift is completely cleaned up, all my tools put away. Any respectable mechanic should do that every time they reach a major step in the build. So you can see the case here is almost completely stripped down. There's some things I left in because it's going to take a little time for me to mark them up to make sure they go back in a certain way. The shifter linkage are removed, just 2 10mm bolts, and also the cable guide is also removed, also 2 10mm bolts. So next step is to throw it in the parts washer, get it all cleaned up, degreased, and maybe the blast cabinet so I can polish up the aluminum a little bit. But yeah, that's it, guys. After we do those 2 steps, then we can start the rebuild process. I have been working on this thing for probably 2 or 3 nights. So yeah, that's going to be it for tonight. If you guys have enjoyed these videos so far, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll catch you all next time.